An Eldritch Knight combines the martial capabilities of a fighter with powerful offensive and defensive magic to create an excellent frontline tank. So in this video, we'll be going over some of the best Eldritch Knight spells you can take for this particular niche. Starting us off at number 10, we have Sickening Radiance, which is a 4th level spell from Xanatar's Guide to Everything. And what this does is any creature that enters or starts its turn in it takes 4d10 radiant damage unless they succeed on a Constitution saving throw. It also has the bonus effect of inflicting 1 level of exhaustion to the creature every time they fail the saving throw. Spells that give exhaustion levels are very rare and usually considered to be quite powerful due to the fact with 6 levels of exhaustion, you just die. As Eldritch Knight, you can use this on a group of enemies before they can even reach you due to the 120-foot range. The reason this spell is so low on this list though, is because as an Eldritch Knight, you will not get this spell until level 19, due to barely being half casters. Also, Constitution saves are the worst ones to force on creatures, and as you are still a fighter, you probably won't have the best spell save DC, which makes it really hard to pull this spell off. So by the time you do gain access to the spell, it's not super impactful outside of some Force Cage combos with one of your other spellcasters, which don't require a high spell save DC at all. Now, before we start with number 9, for the rest of this list, we're going to be assume that the Eldritch Knight has the Warcaster feat. You can pick up at level 4 or even at level 1 if you're playing as a variant human. And what it does is give you advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration, allows you to cast spells while holding weapons, and allows you to cast a spell as an attack of opportunity. Though this spell must have a casting time of 1 action, it must only target that creature. This is essential for any melee caster. So at number 9, we have Fireball, which is a 3rd level spell. Fireball is considered a staple spell to any caster who can take it, as what it does is deals 8d6 fire damage on a failed dexterity saving throw, or half as much on a success to all targets within a 20-foot radius sphere. With an average of 28 damage per creature, Fireball can deal more damage than basically any other 3rd level spell. The downside of using Fireball over a spell like Lightning Bolt is that Fireball will hit everything in the radius, including friendly targets. But if you're able to use it on groups of enemies before they can get close to the party, then you should be in the clear. Let's say that your party is sneaking up on a small enemy camp, and they're all grouped up around a campfire or in a building. You could cast Fireball on the whole group and end a potentially dangerous encounter with one move. This move may only work a couple of times because most DMs will start to not bunch up enemies after their planned combat gets ended very quickly. The only reason such an iconic spell like Fireball is so low on this list is because Eldritch Knights don't get it until they're level 13, and by then full casters just have much better ways to deal with groups of enemies as they have access to 7th level spells. And if you want to see some of the best 7th level spells, you can check out my video on the top 10 best 7th level spells. And at number 8, we have the spell Shatter. Shatter is a 2nd level evocation spell that deals 3d8 thunder damage on a failed dex save to all targets in a 10-foot radius sphere, or half that on a success. Shatter, like the previous spot, is very good for dealing a lot of damage to a group of enemies, and is even better than Fireball for a few reasons. Firstly, it being a 2nd level spell means you get it much sooner. Eldritch Knights can get this spell at level 7 compared to Fireball, which requires level 13. Shatter also has the bonus effect that non-magical objects that aren't being worn or carried also take the damage if it's in the spell's area. This is very useful if you're trying to break down a stone or wooden wall that is blocking the party's way, or if you're trying to sink a small ship full of pirates trying to board your ship. The ability to modify the terrain around enemies is always a strong ability to have, as long as your DM allows you to be creative with it. And at number 7, we have the 1st level evocation spell, Jim's Magic Missiles from Acquisitions Incorporated. Jim's Magic Missiles is a special version of Magic Missiles, as what it does is create 3 darts of magical force that each deal 2d4 force damage, while Magic Missiles only deals 1d4 plus 1. This means that you have a chance to almost double the damage output of the spell. The spell does have a quirk to it where if you roll a critical hit, you deal 5d4 force damage instead of the 4d4 that you would normally deal with a crit. The downside is, if you critically fail, all of the darts turn on the caster. As an Eldritch Knight, you're going to be in melee combat a lot, but it's always nice to have the range capabilities. Imagine that you're 120 feet away from a group of enemies who are running at you in your party. You cast Sickening Radiance to slow them down with the exhaustion, then you cast Jim's Magic Missiles a couple of times until they're able to get to you. It is worth noting that the normal Magic Missile spell should also be considered. Magic Missile may deal less damage than Jim's Magic Missiles, but there's also no attack roll for it, unless the enemy has a way to specifically stop Magic Missiles, like with a Brooch of Shielding or the Shield spell. Also, Jim's Magic Missiles cost 1 gold each time you cast it, and over time that can add up. You always just have to ask yourself, do I want less damage that is guaranteed, or do I want the most possible damage? And at number 6, we have Burning Hands, a 1st level spell that says each creature to 50-foot cone who fails a dexterity saving throw takes 3d6 fire damage, or half as much on a success. Similar to Fireball and Shatter listed previously, This spell is very good for taking out enemies who are grouped up. The reason it takes a higher spot on this list, even though it deals less damage in a spell like Fireball, is that it has a cone rather than a radius. As an Eldritch Knight, you're usually in the front of groups, and spells like Fireball and Shatter have a chance of hitting friendly player characters, while Burning Hands has a much higher chance of only hitting enemies who are in front of you. It's also one of the highest damaging AoEs at this level, so it's the best bang for your buck as a first level spell slot AoE. And it also has the bonus effect that the fire ignites any flammable objects in the area that aren't being worn or carried. This can be useful if you're trying to destroy wooden obstacles in your path. And at number 5, we have the cantrip Green Flameblade, which was originally printed in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. But as with almost everything else in that book, it has been changed and updated with later releases, as Wizards of the Coast seemingly wants to make you forget that the book ever existed. In fact, despite it being the first campaign guidebook and was released back in late 2015, it didn't make it onto Roll20, one of the most popular online RPG sites, until late 2020, more than 5 years after its initial release. Rant aside, though, Green Flameblade was updated and reprinted in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and what it does is have you brandish your weapon, making a melee attack with it against one creature. On hit, the target takes normal damage from the weapon itself, then green fire leaps from the target to a different creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of you, and deals fire damage equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. Green Flameblade is a special spell where you not only get to use your spell, but you also get to make a melee attack in the same action. This spell is good mostly in the early game due to it not allowing you to take an extra attack with your attack action, so its main benefits are early level and opportunity attacks with the Warcaster, and being able to hit multiple targets at low level. But still, Green Flameblade has greater damage potential than your extra attack until you get the third attack from it at level 11. Moving on to number 4, we have Booming Blade. Similar to Green Flameblade, these are spells where you not only get to use the spell, but also make a melee attack at the same time. And what Booming Blade does is, it has you make a melee attack against one creature. On hit, the creature takes the weapon's attack's normal effects, and then, if the target willingly moves 5 or more feet before the start of your next turn, the target takes 1d8 thunder damage. This spell is quite useful if you're trying to lock someone into melee combat, because if the enemy tries to move out of combat with you, they take the 1d8, as well as your attack of opportunity. It also works if you try to escape combat. You can hit it with the Booming Blade and then run. You will still suffer an opportunity attack, but the enemy will not be able to chase you down without taking the 1d8 damage. As a fighter, you probably have a higher AC anyway, so the attack of opportunity might not even hit. Booming Blade is also the hardest hitting cantrip if the target takes the extra damage, so it's always better to use it over just a normal melee attack before you get extra attack. It also adds thunder damage to the initial hit at higher levels, so it will actually do extra damage when used rather than just if the creature moves, though it still deals the extra damage if they move as well. And if used with the Warcaster as your attack of opportunity, you basically guarantee to proc the extra thunder damage. And at number 3, we have Blade Ward. This spell allows you to give yourself resistance against bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage dealt by weapon attacks until the end of your next turn. What's great about this spell is that it does not say you have resistance to non-magic weapons like most spells and magic items do. You see, most things that give resistance to damage types have the restriction that it only works on non-magic damage types. This is usually done to balance them around the fact that most higher level enemies will have magic weapons they'll be able to ignore the effects of weaker spells and abilities. Blade Ward is an action sadly, which means you would definitely want to have the 7th level Eldritch Knight ability War Magic that allows you to use your action to cast a cantrip, and then you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. This is the kind of spell you would use if the big bad or just any heavy hitting enemy is trying to target you. Imagine if a Bone Devil uses its multi-attack on you. It has 2 claw attacks dealing 9 damage each, as well as one with its tail dealing another 15 for a total of 33 damage on average. With Blade Ward active on your turn, that will cut the damage in half to 16. Being able to survive more hits is always a good thing, if for no other reason than so the rest of your party can deal more damage to it without having to worry about dying. So while it's normally a useless cantrip for casters, it is kind of good for a defensive focused Eldritch Knight. And at number 2, we have the new spell from Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos, Silvery Barbs. This spell shares a similar niche as Shield and Absorb Elements, in that it is a defensive spell that you can use as a reaction. And what it does is, when a creature you can see within 60 feet of you successfully makes an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can force them to reroll a d20 for the attack roll, then use whichever roll is lower. While this doesn't guarantee that a hit will become a miss like the flat AC buff that Shield might provide, it can be used on any creature within 60 feet. So while Shield can only protect you, this can also be used to protect your allies. In addition to the first effect, you can also give yourself or another allied creature advantage on their next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So in addition to the defensive ability of granting one creature disadvantage, you are also getting some extra offensive ability of giving an ally advantage on their next roll. Overall, this is just a really nice spell and would take the top spot on this list if Eldritch Knights weren't a frontline melee fighter, and were instead, like most casters, squishy backliner. And finally, at number 1, we have Shield. What this spell does is, until the start of your next turn, you have a +5 bonus to your AC. Any spell or item that gives you bonus AC is great, which is why it's very rare to see spells do so. Most spells that grant you bonus to your AC, like Barkskin and Mage Armor, don't actually give you a plus to your AC, rather just set your AC to a certain number. Barkskin gives you 16 and Mage Armor gives you 13 plus your Dexterity modifier. Being able to decide when to give yourself a +5 AC with only reaction and a first level spell slot no less is very useful. Most early to mid game enemies only have around a +4 to hit. And if you're playing a defensive fighter, most enemies will only beat your AC by a point or two. So by the time you use Shield, your chances of getting hit are very, very low. Shield also has a bonus effect that if you cast it in response to Magic Missile, you take no damage as it simply blocks the darts. This does not come up very often, but it is a useful effect if you're fighting a low-level caster. Shield is also one of the few low-level spells in the game that is just as useful in Tier 4 levels of play as it is in Tier 1 with no upcasting required, just like Absorb Elements. And the main reason Shield beats out Absorb Elements is because you don't take any damage. AC is a thing to beat for every attack roll in the game, and most monsters deal damage with attack rolls while elemental damage is not as often seen. With a high AC, you just avoid the damage completely, rather than taking half damage, and the effect lasts until the start of your next turn, so it's possible to keep the AC buff for a full fight with enough spell slots, as most combats last only 3 to 6 rounds on average. Even spellcasters who never go into melee take Shield as one of their first spells because it's just such a useful defensive tool, so really it should be no surprise to see the number 1 spot on a list of best spells for a melee spellcaster, where getting hit is much more common. The debate rages on which spell is the better one between Silvery Barbs and Shield, but Shield won out for this list due to the fact that Eldritch Knights are frontliners, so while both are top tier, Shield is a little bit better as you're more likely to get hit by multiple attacks in a single round. No matter which way you lean on this debate, both are perfect for your next Eldritch Knight. Alright, and that's the video. What do you think? Should we make another video similar to this for like top 10 druid spells? Let me know what you think about that, as well as any ideas you have for future videos just like this one down in the comments.